Of all the things that have happened to me on Hollywood set so far, this story I'm about to tell is by far the most prominent, terrible, and embarrassing. Oh yeah, it includes George Clooney yelling at me. It's another story time with Matt. So as I've said before, I've worked in the investment industry in Philadelphia before coming to California, so I had no acting experience when I started doing background work on set. And in background work, you're just supposed to sort of blend in. You get no speaking lines. But on a lucky occasion, the camera does get close on you. So when I moved to Hollywood, I just wanted to learn on sets. I wanted to be around good actors, good directors. And I had the great fortune of applying for a George Clooney movie called Suburbicon starring Matt Damonm. And from what I understand, George handpicks his background people, especially this was a period piece from like the 1960s. So he wanted a certain look. And I was lucky enough to get selected. I even got to go to a wardrobe fitting a few weeks before the shoot. They cut my hair several times to kind of do like a camera test. I felt like a real Hollywood actor, but never having been on a Hollywood set, I didn't know if George Clooney would be there. He had some assistant director directing for him, like if actors would be there. I didn't know what the scene was gonna be. And they rented out an entire neighborhood like in Pasadena somewhere and had all of the families who actually live in that neighborhood in those houses. They relocated them somewhere else. So this was a big shoot. There was massive equipment. We're actually shooting at night, but the scene takes place during the day. So they had huge lamps covering the street basically over top of us to really light the streets like it was daytime. And some of these cameras were some of the biggest equipment I'd seen in my life. So you could estimate that it was like thousands of dollars per minute for this shoot. And I came to learn that the scene we were doing had about 200 background people, and we were angry neighbors trying to, if anybody's seen the movie, we're trying to get one certain neighbor to like move out of the neighborhood. So we're throwing stuff at the neighbor. So when we arrive, I get off the bus. Like I said, I didn't know if any actors would be there or George Clooney, and he's right there. He's prominent. I'm like, wow, this was like my real first big celebrity encounter, but we were also going to be working together. So I kind of get settled in background holding, and then they call us to set, and George Clooney's right there, and he asks, hey, does anybody know how to smoke a cigarette? And me, always being super eager and a non-smoker, I was like, yeah, I can figure out how to smoke a cigarette. Yeah, I can do it. So out of these like 200 people, George is like, okay, you got it. You got the role. And he grabs me by the shoulder and brings me to the spot he wants me to go to. And he said, this is actually gonna be a really cool scene. We're gonna put this giant camera that's on a crane. It's gonna start right on your face, right here. And he's like, when I say action, I want you to light the cigarette, take a puff, and then the camera's gonna pull away out into the sky. And then we're gonna see all of the other neighbors, but you're really starting the scene. This is gonna be just incredible experience for you. So George is like directing me and pushing my shoulders in the right direction, how I should move, take a little step back once I smoked the cigarette. And it was just so surreal. I felt incredible that this was just a once in a lifetime experience, and I was getting it on my first few days in California. And if there wasn't pressure enough, this scene involved Matt Damonm, who was just right off to the side. And Matt Damonm was cracking little jokes, and George was cracking little jokes, and I throw a little joke in, like we were just three Hollywood actors just hanging out on set. Best friends practically. So George asked me if I'm all set. Feel pretty comfortable. So George goes away back behind the monitors, which are pretty far away, and I get my little cigarettes, and they're herbal cigarettes. They burn a little bit faster, but they're close enough to the real thing. It's Hollywood after all. I think I'm honestly pretty nervous, but also pretty confident, oddly. Like maybe I was meant to do this. And then from really far away, I hear George yell, and action. And I get confident. I take out my cigarette, just like George taught me. The day before, I watched Revolutionary Road, a Leonardo DiCaprio movie, to kind of get an idea of like how they smoked cigarettes and how everybody moved. And I swear Leo in that movie smoked his cigarettes like this. So I grabbed the cigarette and I went like this, and I lit the cigarette and I took a quick puff, and the camera starts moving away from my face because it was starting here, and then it stops. And I hear George go, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh man, there's 200 background people here. There's probably somebody out there over my shoulder, like looking directly into the camera or something like that. Matt Damon's horrified. His jaw's like, he has a little smile on his face, like he's about to see somebody get busted. And I see George running out off into my peripheral vision. I'm like, I can't wait to see what's happening here. This is the craziest thing that's already ever happened to me, but then George yelling at somebody's gonna be crazier. And George making his way through the crowd, and then I realize he's coming at me. And he's like, what are you doing? I'm smoking the cigarette like we talked about. And he goes, no, you're not. And I'm like, yeah. And George says, no. This is my biggest pet peeve on a Hollywood set. When there's somebody smoking in a movie and they're not an actual smoker, I can tell. You didn't savor the cigarette. You didn't let it linger on your fingers and in your nose, like really feel the smoke. And he's right. I'd never smoked a cigarette before. So George looked around and he's like, does anybody here actually smoke cigarettes in real life? And of course, like 2 people raise their hands, and he's like, okay, you. And I was like, cool. All right. So should I just like take a step back here, and then we'll kind of both start the scene, me and the this guy? And he's like, no. I'm gonna reassign your position over there. And he literally points to like the 201st spot on set behind everybody. So I didn't make it in the movie other than this one frame of the trailer. And the story doesn't end there. Last year, I went to a screening event of a George Clooney movie as a SAG-AFTRA member. So George was there in person for his movie The Tender Bar, and Ben Affleck was an actor in it, Christopher Lloyd, who played Doc in Back to the Future, and they were all there on a panel. And with SAG, I'd been many of these screenings recently and had a chance to talk to Will Smith, Jessica Chastain, and Kristen Stewart, and got a lot of good conversation and feedback. But George Clooney being here, I did kind of want to see if he was still kind of mad at me for the incident on set. So I asked him. So it's pretty private, and I sit in the front row. So I make eye contact with George as he's kind of talking about the movie just to kick things off. Does he recognize me? Then the moderator of this like panel discussion says, hey, does anybody in the audience have a question? And of course, I'm already with my hand. Lizzie has a camera next to me, ready to take the footage.
My name's Matt Valvardi. First movie I got to work on was Suburbicon. I don't know if you recall, but I smoked this cigarette very fake the wrong way, and I didn't make the final cut.
And then Ben Affleck grabs the microphone and says,
George mentioned you to me.
What not to do. What not to do.
So everybody kind of had a laugh, but I still want that redemption to get in the George Clooney movie with speaking lines. I'll just never do it smoking a cigarette. Anyway, until next story.